Yo, Zenith Nation, welcome back to Catch The Zenith, the podcast where I document my journey to get better in life and business. Today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections where I comment on some of my most interesting posts from the week on X. And by the way, if you're new here to this podcast, I'm Nicola, I'm an entrepreneur and master student, so please share and enjoy. Let's cover the first post. How to reflect on the day. Point out one thing you're proud of and one thing you could do better. This is such a powerful end of the day routine I did for the past 4 or 5 or even 6 years, and it's pretty impactful and short, simple, and it works great, at least in my case. And why it works so great, it helps you to point out something you're proud of or something what was good, that you celebrate your small wins, and on the flip side you point out the most important thing that you could do better. So it helps you to reflect yourself, to improve business wise but also in your personal life. And why I also think it's so powerful is because it's short and therefore it's more sustainable in the long run that you do it on a consistent basis, because it takes only maybe 5 minutes. I personally did it for most of the time when I was commuting back home from uni or my internship or work or whatever. And on my motorcycle, I would have like a conversation with myself, and I would start first with actually the uncomfortable things, something I could do better, and I would reflect on my day, and maybe I will find like certain situations where I could have, or particular situations where I could have behaved differently. So I would identify this room for improvement thing, and then on the flip side, something I did good, and I think, yeah, that is worth celebrating. So how to end your day with, or how to reflect on your day at the end of the day. One thing you're good or you did good, and one thing you could do better. I hope that helps. Next post. Focus on what you can control. Circle of concern, things you worry about you can't change. Circle of influence, where your actions make a difference. Shift your energy to your circle of influence and you will get results. So quickly, let me explain what is a circle of concern and circles of influence. So a circle of concern is basically things you worry about, but you can't really have a direct impact on them. However, the circle of influence is something that is within your control. And you can think of like a big circle. And within the center of this big circle is one circle that's a little bit smaller. And that is your circle of influence. And then you have on the outer part of this large circle, or you basically have then another circle going around the core circle, the circle of influence, which is the circle of concern. Things that are really like, think of maybe wars that are going on, national debts, things that you perhaps don't have like a real direct impact on them. Or maybe the news is also a good example. And understanding this concept of the circle of influence and circle of concern, this was one of the most powerful concepts I understood, because it helped me really to become more effective in life and to less talking about stuff that are simply not within my control, that I can't really have a direct impact on. And of course, there is nuance to it. Maybe you have like a indirect impact on maybe whatever national debt if you somehow do something about it. I don't know, an initiative or I don't know what. But the point being is, if you focus on things that are under your direct control, like your habits, your behavior, where you work, that's really powerful because you can do something about it. But if it's something like the news, maybe a car accident happened, which is terrible, and I'm feel off the bottom of my heart feeling sorry that something like that happened, but it already happened and I can't change it right now. And if I would consume all day long like terrible news and all the negative things that are going on this planet, then I think that's a pretty miserable existence. But if I focus, or if I ignore that stuff and focus rather on stuff that are within my control, I think I'm a more productive individual, and like that I can make the world a better place. And I'm way more effective, not only in my personal life, but also I think for the planet itself. If we focus on stuff we can actually impact directly. And this is, by the way, a concept from the books of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I highly recommend reading it. And to drive the point really home, I also have this quote. I came across this quote by Tony Robbins. He said, "Where focus goes, energy flows. Let me repeat that. Where focus goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, whatever you're focusing on grows. In other words, your life is controlled by what you are focusing on or what you focus on. That's why you need to focus on where you want to go, not on what you fear. Such a powerful quote by Tony Robbins. And the reason for that, why I think it's so powerful, is really focus drives so many things in our lives. And one thing is obviously energy. Think of someone who is all day long consuming, let's say, short form content about wars going on, about politics, about national debt, about nuclear war, all the terrible things, Obviously, their thoughts are pretty heavily focused on stuff like that. Fair enough. If you consume, it's logical. If you consume all day long about a certain topic, you will think a lot about that stuff. However, if you focus on, let's say, different stuff, like, let's say, your family, your personal life, your job, things that are on or your habits, your behavior, working out, how can I be a good parent to my children, all that stuff that is like within your control, I think we are way more productive, and then we can direct that energy and our thoughts towards those things that are I think more preferable, or let's put it like that. I think those are more productive things to do or to focusing on. And yeah, long story short, where your focus goes, your energy flows, a powerful thing. And this concept really of the circle of influence and the circle of concern, you can always think about that. Like when you're talking to a friend about a particular topic, you can think, am I currently complaining about something that is outside of my control? Or am I like worrying about something, or simply talking about stuff that is really not worth talking about? Then perhaps it is in the circle of concern. But if you talk about like stuff that, I could maybe do that better, or this is something interesting, things that are direct in your direct influence, then focus more on that kind of stuff. And the interesting thing is, the more you focus on things that are on your direct control, or you have impact on that, then your circle of influence grows and gets bigger and bigger, and you worry less about stuff that's going on. So I hope that helps. For me, more detailed description, by the way, you can look up in the book. And I think this is also quite interesting right now to me, because I had recently several deep conversations about politics and current issues that are going on in the world. And these conversations really made me realize something important. Sometimes spending too much energy on things we can't control can distract us from areas where we can make a real difference. Because, if I put my time and effort into being a productive employee or building a successful software business, I believe I could make a way bigger positive impact in the world. And this, of course, doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about tough topics or hard topics, but it does mean we should be mindful about where we direct our energy. And I think the circle of concern, that stuff like nuclear war, national debt, meteorite destroying the earth, all things that are simply, can't really control. It's not really worth thinking about them too much, and more thinking about, or thinking about like my attitude, my habits, my actions, things that I can change. All right, next post. Best framework to assess a niche. So this is more a business-ish post. So maybe give you first a little bit context. When you decide which niche you want to serve with your business, it's helpful to have like a framework at hand, how you assess whether this is a good market to go in or not. And there is a framework by Alex Hormozi, 4 steps. The first one is the customer in pain? Is the person you want to serve with your business, with your solution, in actual pain? Like, does they have a real pain point? Second, are they easy to target? Like, can you find them somewhere? Maybe online, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You need to find them somewhere. Then, third, is it a growing market? Like, hopefully it's not a shrinking market. It's a growing market. Like, for instance, a shrinking market, I think, is the newspaper industry, like the physical newspapers. Nobody's reading anymore, or almost nobody's reading anymore physical newspapers. Everybody's reading on iPhones and stuff like that. So it needs to be a growing market. And lastly, the target customer should have the purchasing power. If they don't have the money, obviously it's hard to sell them something. So to summarize that, pain, they are easy to target, it's a growing market, and they have the purchasing power. If a niche checks off all 4 checkboxes, then perhaps it's something worth considering. Otherwise, I don't do that. And I did that quite frankly also with one of my one past business. Actually, not when I started. I came later across this framework. This coaching business was about helping adults with ADHD, or more precisely, high performers with ADHD, to become more productive. And interestingly, high performers with ADHD, think of entrepreneurs, strategy consultants that have ADHD, they were in pretty big pain. They were more or less easy to target because you can find them on Instagram. They follow other ADHD influencers. It's a growing market, obviously. More and more people are getting diagnosed with ADHD. And lastly, purchasing power. Yeah, high performers with ADHD definitely have the purchasing power because they have a pretty decent job. However, and that's kind of interesting, not all ADHDers obviously have the purchasing power. There are a lot of ADHDers, they don't have the economic success due to the fact they are procrastinating or not really productive, and then they don't have that much purchasing power. So when I started, I focused on those folks, but then I realized, okay, they are pretty hard to work with. They are not really, following through what I'm teaching them, and they maybe postpone the payments, and it's really hard to work with them. And then I I made an analysis of my top clients I had. I had a little bit more than 40 clients. Did an analysis with whom was it the most easy to work with, and I realized they had few things in common. They were pretty proactive. They implemented everything I told them to implement. They made their payment directly in the beginning when I onboarded them. No procrastination. They did it directly, and in general, they were pretty I would say pretty curious people in general. So long story short, then I just focused on them, and then all of a sudden, the people with ADHD, they had the purchasing power because I focused on high performers. So I think this is such a powerful framework. I think at least this is what I'm saying to myself, always be mindful when you go in a particular niche that all four criteria are checked off. All right, next one, which is a quote by Stephen R. Covey. He wrote in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. One of the most powerful concepts I learned initially from Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning, one of the best books I ever read. And Stephen Covey also discusses his book as well in his book. And one major takeaway simply, when there is a stimulus, so for instance, someone is talking to you in a really, really aggressive manner, that could be the stimulus. And then, interestingly, between the stimulus and your response, your answer, you have a little bit of freedom. You have space to think about how to choose your reaction. And that's so powerful because that allows us to make an active effort on choosing our attitudes, our mindset, basically. Always an interesting word, mindset, but basically our attitudes, how we go through life, how we act, and particularly in such a situation where somebody's pretty aggressive, you could also get aggressive and pretty upset because the other person is aggressive. Or you could simply say hey, I stay calm and I listen, but I will make sure where I show the limits and the boundaries, of course. But you can make an active decision. And I think this realization that we always have this freedom of we can actively say, I want to choose this reaction. And I think being mindful and really aware of this opportunity, to always choose our reaction is so powerful and really freeing to me personally. And it helped me to basically think more before I act. Not always. I'm not saying I'm doing always a good job at it, but it helped me in a lot of different situations to simply breathe, maybe 5 seconds, and then give an answer or then act and behave. So choose your reaction carefully. Next post, which is a repost of Alex Hormozi's text. He wrote, "Modern day freedom is less about having unlimited options and more about knowing which options to ignore." So, why I think this is powerful? Because we are living in a world with information overload, obviously. Social media, news, you name it. And I think the people that are the most successful, or not all of them, but some of them, they have a pretty strong capability or skill to say no to a lot of different things. They eliminate all the clutter and focus on the main thing. And I remember, for instance, Sam Ovens, the founder of consulting.com and school.com, which is a software business, the fastest growing, I would say the fastest growing SaaS for communities. And it will be like, from my perspective, the next Facebook, but for communities. He is pretty ruthless when it comes to eliminate stuff that is simply not important. And for instance, when you look at his desk or his computer or his phone, everything is super neat. It's clean. It looks really orderly and organized. And I think this is a requisite for a successful life, that we eliminate a lot of things that are just clutter. And you could think of apps on your phone, messaging apps. You don't need 10 messaging apps. 2 or 3 are enough, or even 1 is enough. Why do you need 10 different emails when 1 is enough? You get the gist. And also in the physical space as well, when it comes to clothes. Like I, for instance, have a pretty minimalistic wardrobe. I wear most of the time black t-shirts. And right now I have, for instance, my sport t-shirt on. Or if I wear a shirt, like a little bit more elegant style, I wear normally a light blue shirt. That might change in the future if I want, but for now this works great, and it's it's a pretty minimalistic wardrobe. My pants, by the way, are usually dark blue, a black t-shirt, and if it's more elegant, I go for a shirt, a light blue shirt. Pretty simple. And makes life easier, and you need to think less. And circling back to the quote of Alex Hormozi, I think also it's powerful, if we watch so many different YouTube videos, it's kind of overwhelming. Or if we consume so much short-form content, pretty overwhelming. But if we each day focusing on maybe one really interesting YouTube video and truly want to understand the core idea of that, or maybe a blog post, or maybe a chapter in a book, we can remember stuff better compared to opposed to if we consume just mindless and doom scroll through social media. I think it's really hard for the brain to remember anything, because if you watch at a 30-second reel or a YouTube short, it's pretty hard to retain that afterward if you consume after that particular video 20 other videos. And the interesting thing, especially if you're watching, let's say, self-help stuff or things that could potentially make your life better, then it's really easy to fall in that tendency to start mental masturbating, like to think what I'm watching is actually productive. But I think in the end, it's not that productive at all. It's more mental masturbation. We feel good about it, although we don't change our lives. And I think, therefore, it's better to focus on, maybe you read an hour and you deeply focus on one thing. And by focusing on one thing, you can remember the contents better. And yeah, saying no to a lot of stuff nowadays is so powerful, not only in business, but also in our personal lives, how we handle social media, how we construct or organize our computers, our phones. And I think one concept that really served me well was digital minimalism, to really get rid of all the clutter that's on my phone or on my computer, and focusing on the few apps that have the biggest impact on my life and truly make me a more productive individual, professional and personal wise. Next post. Naval's secret to success. I probably read 1 to 2 hours a day. That puts me in the top 0.00001%. I think that alone accounts for any material success I've had in my life and any intelligence I might have. So that's by the way a quote by Naval Ravikant reposted by a guy called Alex and Books. Naval, for those of you who don't know, Naval Ravikant is the founder of AngelList and a pretty, I would say almost a philosopher. And he has this famous podcast episode called How to Get Rich Without Being Lucky or Getting Lucky, whatever. And which is also a thread on X. This is, I would say, the best podcast episode, one of the best podcast episodes ever when it comes to wealth, wealth in general, like getting financially independent. It's just super good. It's 3 hours long. It's worth every single minute. And he is he reads a lot. And I think reading, especially nowadays economy and especially right now where we have so much information, is just too powerful because so few people do it, because it's hard to focus for 1 hour on one thing. A phone, for instance, and scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or whatever is way more stimulating to our brain. At least if we train our brain to get the main stimulation from those sources. However, if we flip that and get it from a book, we can also get dopamine, but it's a healthier dopamine. And that brings me to an interesting graph I came across, which basically shows I will describe that quickly. On the left-hand side, you can see like the dopamine levels that are associated when you read a book. And what you basically can see is if you read a book, your dopamine levels slightly increase, but slowly, pretty natural. They come to a peak and they slowly go down again. That's how it works. However, then if you compare it, and that's the right side of this graph, you see like someone's brain or someone's dopamine levels if they scroll on social media. It starts like a baseline, then it goes pretty up, like really high. It skyrockets, and then it crashes down, and then it comes up again. So it's really that, depending on what information you consume, it's so stimulating for our brain, and it's not really it's a pretty darn artificial thing to consume, I would argue. And my main takeaway from this discussion is reading book is just wonderful, because not only do you calm your mind before sleeping if you read before sleeping, but or in general it relaxes your mind, but also it helps you to gain so much knowledge. And imagine if you read every single day 1 hour. It's so powerful. And always in those phases in my life where I read almost every single day, I'm pretty focused. I think more clearly. I can articulate better what exactly I want to tell someone. I can use precise words to articulate something, a situation or a particular action. And there are for sure other, and maybe one major benefit is also focus. You're training your focus muscle by reading something, because you're not switching around like on social media, for instance. When you read, you just read. When you are on social media, fair enough, you're just on social media, but you switch between so many different videos, or at least you watch one video, then the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. So much information, and you can't remember afterwards anything. But with a book, it's way different. You can really engage deeply in something. You can work with the book. You can mark stuff. Maybe you have an idea while reading and you use like a pencil and write something in the book. I do that occasionally. And by the way, that's an idea from Ryan Holiday, like really engaging with a book, and like maybe you make a note there, you mark there something. And yeah, I think that's pretty powerful. All this to say that reading book, one of the habits that definitely changed my life for the better. Right now, by the way, I'm reading 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. I'm actually rereading this book. First, I read it in German. In German, I wouldn't recommend to read it in German because the translation is not that good. However, in English, obviously, it's the original language. It's super super good. It's one of the greatest books ever, I would say, that I've read so far, because Jordan Peterson has, like, he obviously 12 rules in this life, but he, for each rule, it's like an essay. He shares stories. He shares biblical contents or information. He shares pretty tactical stuff. Like, for instance, he has this rule: tell the truth or at least don't lie. And obviously, we all know we shouldn't lie. We know the what, but why actually shouldn't we lie? And he makes a pretty good argument for that in his book, so I highly recommend that. Apart from that, what else I've read? I reread again this year $100 Million Leads, which answers the question, how do I let people know about the stuff I sell, like marketing, but in a really practical way that you can implement. So for everybody who's having a business, or also just in general working in a job, you're responsible for getting leads. This is a must read. It's just too good. Just a great book. There's also a free video course. And also I've read A Man's Search for Meaning. I started that, and again, I was rereading this book for the second time or even third. And I started that last year, end of year, and finished that, I guess, in January, something like that. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Obviously, fantastic. Undescribable how good this book is. Like a must read, definitely. So maybe you have now some ideas which books you can tackle. By the way, I'm also planning to reread 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because was one of the first self-help books I've ever read, and there are so many things I want to get back to, and maybe now reading it from a different angle and perspective. And yeah, so I hope that helps, guys. And we are already at the end of this episode. So guys, thank you so much for listening. And by the way, if you like my content, you presumably will also like my newsletter, where I share every single Sunday basically notes to self on topics high performance and business. So pretty simple. I also share there some interesting things I've watched, like YouTube videos or podcasts, maybe a book I've read, an idea I came across, some quotes I found interesting. So feel free to subscribe to my newsletter down below. And now, thank you very much for your attention.